Let's look at the agenda review and see if there are any additions or comments or changes. Anybody online have anything? You good with the agenda? All right, how about public participation? We don't have anybody present. Doesn't look like we have anybody online. All right, so we'll move on to approval of the November 25th, 2025 meeting minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review those? Yeah. Any proposed changes or edits, additions? All right.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. All right.
Nice.
Unanimous there. I guess we can move on to the application for membership. We received an application. Jessie Preston, who has joined us online today. So welcome, Jessie. We have your application in front of us. I think everybody has an opportunity to have seen that. So, yeah, welcome. Do you want to take a few minutes to tell us about yourself?
Sure. My name is Jessie Preston. I know some of you from other boards that I sit on. But for those who I have not met, I'll give you a little bit of my background. I sit on the Lane County CAC for like OHP members. And I was on the LCHC. I technically still am the Lane Community Health Council. However, with Pacific Source pulling out of Lane County, that might not be something that I continue to do. It has put me in the position to learn a lot about county health. And I can't help but see how the health of our air quality affects our community's health. So it led me to also want to be on this board so that I could connect some more of those dots for the county.
Perfect. You guys have any questions off the bat for Jessie?
I just want to say that the healthcare community, maybe we should amend our bylaws and make a spot on the CAC for that specialty.
So yeah, part of our conversation today will be kind of broadening membership a little bit. So whether or not we have to have an official title for it, or we just, kind of approach that out. But being fairly unfamiliar with some of the groups, do you mind telling us a little bit about what the kind of the focus and is around the rural stuff that you like? Is it primarily air quality? The use of like pesticides, that sort of stuff, or what is kind of the, if you don't mind sharing a little bit, I'm interested to learn. I tried to look it up, but ran out of time.
Yeah, for the Rural Advisory Committee, it is a subsection or a subcommittee of the Lane County, the CAC that I'm on, that specifically works with healthcare related things as applies to OHP, Trillium, and Pacific Source. So my main interest is in having healthy communities. And in trying to have healthy communities, I look at things like transportation, air quality, water quality, soil quality, the systems of healthcare, and how sometimes those systems put in place to help people actually hinder people from being as healthy as they can be. So I kind of try to look at everything. Because when we can connect all of those dots and we can look at this organization is doing this and this organization is doing that, there's a lot of overlap. And instead of everybody extending their finances and energy to repeat the same work, we could be working collaboratively, connecting those dots and really moving us forward.
Definitely.
I think maybe a question, Jessie, that would be good for the group.
I hear somebody talking, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry, I'll try to speak up, Jessie. I think I know this answer myself, but for the group would be good. You live in Lane County. What part of the county do you live in, and what some of your lived experiences there, I think, could be helpful and interesting to the group.
Well, I have lived in Lane County for a couple decades now, and I have lived in various neighborhoods. I used to live in Springfield, Thurston area. I lived in the River Road area up until about 6 months ago when I purchased a home out in Veneta, and now I live in Veneta. I have experienced health systems and air quality issues firsthand because of living close to a paper mill. I have had to take care of family members and health consequences of living so close to paper mills. And I have carried those experiences into the work that I do on the CAC and LCHC and the Rural Advisory Committee to just kind of share what that everyday impact looks like, and not an activist perspective, not an agency perspective, but just somebody who's living with the consequences.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that something that as I open and reflect is being able to speak a little bit to the lived experiences and the difference between those neighborhoods throughout the county. I imagine you could speak to some of that if you needed to, or if it came up in, dialogue and things like that on the committee.
Yes, extensively.
And it sounds like you're familiar with basically the role of the Citizens Advisory and being, here to serve on behalf of the board. And, we obviously have some, limitations and guidelines around what we do. And yeah, we kind of, do what the board asks us to do. And in the meantime, if they don't have anything up and coming, we, tend to find hot topics that are of interest to members of the board. And we do have a couple of things with the titles coming up that we're going to be
Yes.
reviewing. So we do have a few things that are tasked, but yeah, we typically meet every month. And I think opening it up virtually has helped with attendance, but this time would work for you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And if it's something that I put on my calendar, then I will arrange other things around it. So it'll remain a priority.
Cool.
Anybody have any questions? Evelina, Chris, do you guys have any questions online? Ben? Oh, Ben. You have any questions? No? All right. Well,
The regulatory scheme for air quality does not address indoor air quality.
Mhm.
And I was wondering what your thoughts were on how people can protect themselves on the indoor air quality front. And if there are opportunities you see in the future for more than just individual action on that.
Well, from lived experience, which I'm the most comfortable sharing with, my youngest son is medically fragile, and we have at least one air purifier in each room of the home to keep the indoor air quality as healthy as possible. When I lived in Springfield, that was almost impossible. It was in the red, even with all of them running all the time. In River Road, it was 50-50. The indoor air monitors were, good half of the time, bad half of the time. Out here in Veneta, very, very seldomly do the air monitors read red. So definitely the further away from, Eugene, Springfield you get, the better the air quality is. And I think that shows that is true both indoor and outdoor. The air filters and air purifiers help, but they don't fix the problem. Sometimes the term sick building comes to mind, that there are some buildings whose air quality aren't good simply because of the age and disrepair of the building. And those are things that need to be addressed at more than just a LRAPA or perspective. It's further reaching than that. And again, more of those connecting the dots and trying to be in all of the places to learn all of those things so that I can help connect those dots. It is an issue. I've seen neighbors of mine who worked at sick buildings, and they had a lot of negative health impacts because of it. So it is a concern, even though I don't feel that there is an avenue for addressing it quite yet. I'd like to be part of what helps fix that, though.
As a follow-up, I'm curious, and you don't have to answer if it's personal, but like, as far as the monitoring in the home, is that primarily like particulates, pollens, like? Is there like a purple air type?
I think
movement?
if Jesse's using what lots of consumers have, which is an air purifier that has a color dial of like how good to bad, sometimes a number,
Yeah.
sometimes they're not. That is essentially a PM2.5 monitoring. I don't know if it's quite to the same degree. It's not to the same degree of like our nephelometers or our BAMs, but I don't know if it's quite to the same degree of like a purple air. But it's better than like nothing whatsoever in
Right.
terms of like how good. Sometimes too, humidity can have an impact on that, but
Oh,
I'm
primarily
assuming, Jesse, that's kind of like the built into the air purifier type of monitoring, or do you have something more than that?
I have more.
Okay.
I have a Dyson. I have a top of the line Dyson that monitors for VOCs, for PM 2.5s. And then I can't remember the name of it, but I'm like sitting right next to it. So just a second. It's called an Air Curie, and it also monitors for everything. And then I used to have a plume that was lent to my family when we lived in Thurston from Beyond Toxics. And that also captures information for everything.
Interesting. Always like to learn about new things, so. Great. Any other questions? See any hands online? Well, if it sounds good, we can ask Jesse to step out of the room, I guess, so we can have an internal
Yeah, I
discussion.
Let me see if I can.
think we can move her into kind of a lobby.
I think that's the next step, right?
From meeting?
Well, if we get the remove from meeting, that will like remove her from the meeting and let's see. I think
Maybe
what
that room.
Jesse, if you could, we're kind of going through the logistics of how to kind of create a room. So normally what we do is the applicant kind of removes themselves so there can be a discussion, which is the video gets posted online anyway, so you'll be able to see that. But maybe if you want to just log off real quick and then log back on, and then we can have a discussion while you're kind of in that waiting room, and then we'll readmit you back into the room when discussion has resumed. Does that seem like a reasonable amount of approach? Yeah.
Yeah, that
Does
makes sense,
seem-
because then I don't have to know the timing. I'll just log right back in, and when you're ready, you'll let me in. That makes sense.
Exactly, yep. Cool.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Next time I'll try. The breakout room.
Well, this
yeah.
is the first time I've done this, so sorry, but get the
Well-
procedure a little bit.
Last time we were in Zoom, and since then we've shifted to
Okay,
Teams now,
okay.
so we haven't routed that need for them, and so, yeah.
Well, and then now is just the time for us to have a discussion about, whether or not so for new folks, the idea is that we don't approve it, we make a recommendation to the board on whether or not we support adding a member. So you guys have kind of thoughts?
100% on board with her membership.
Chris?
And who is she representing?
Public.
Just public at large, okay. And I got, what agency, did she work for an agency? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that and had some distractions. I know she sits on several boards, and I thought I heard that she's in a public health organization, is that correct?
Yeah, excuse me, the Public Health Citizen Advisory Committee and the Rural Advisory Committee, and really working closely with groups that consult and advise CCOs, the coordinated care organizations like Trillium now, used to be
Yeah.
Physics Source as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of
All
work
right,
with.
You had to look up the CCO, and I had to look up a few of these. Yeah, she's on a number of committees, and what she started off just talking about was connecting the dots, right, between these different, and
Yeah.
the overlap between them, so.
I did hear that part. Yeah, thank you.
Cool, okay.
Yes, she seems very qualified. I think we should really
I
consider
don't
her.
really, sorry, I get, tell Lisa kind of freaking out too. I've never seen her get. No.
What was that?
I think
Uh,
Paul's
backgrounds.
got background.
Oh.
Evelina.
Paul? Paul, thoughts?
Did you guys hear me?
Yeah, we heard you, Evelina. Paul, Ben? Thoughts?
I don't have any particular objections or thoughts one way or another.
And I want to respect your input, Evelyn. I didn't hear it. I was trying to ask you to repeat and I had myself muted, so.
Oh, I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
think
I
she's
said
great.
I liked her.
Yeah,
you.
me too.
All right, well, it sounds like everybody's in favor, so, do I need to make a motion?
Well,
Or
I
do
think
we-
if,
to forward it?
I think that if, it depends on how Robert's rule of formality we want as a group and as the chair, that's kind of your decision to make. I think that, the consensus has been established, but if you want to go through a one by one like vote, we can, but that's,
Well, I think we all are in consensus, so with that, we will move forward with
recommendation.
a recommendation to the board.
Unanimous recommendation.
Unanimous recommendation to the board?
Okay.
All right, now do we tell, we
Yeah,
can bring her
okay.
back, bring her back
Back
and we can
in.
let her know?
And she can, the board formally appoints to the CAC, so that will be at the next month, the February board meeting will add this to the docket for the board to review. And then Jesse's welcome to continue to, as a public participation, participant, observe the rest of the meeting today, and then, we can follow up, but if you want to let Jesse know.
All right, welcome back, Jesse. So we were just kind of summarizing. So it was unanimous that the CAC would move forward with making a recommendation to the board. And that process is basically at their next meeting. It would be an agenda item for them based on our recommendation. And then, yeah, you're welcome to stay for the rest of this meeting if you'd like to. And the decision should come and you'd be notified.
Yeah, I'll mention, Jesse, that if you don't need to participate at the board meeting in February to advocate for yourself and your position, I think with a unanimous recommendation from the CAC, I believe the board would be pretty agreeable to that appointment. But if you wanted to participate as a public participant and then say, hey, I am an applicant on the CAC and I'd love for you to consider me, that is an open opportunity for you.
And what day is the February meeting for the board?
It is the second Thursday of the month. So let's see. I think, yeah, second Thursday, I know that for sure, but the date of that is, yep, the 12th at 12:15. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great. All right, so I guess moving along in the agenda, we'll hand it over to Travis for the board meeting overview.
Yes, so thanks, everybody. I can give a review of January's board meeting, which was the first one back from or in the new year. We had our normal public participation at the start, meeting minute review. Kelly, you gave a presentation to the board of the annual report, which was included in the board's packet. There was not much reflection on the report, but they did see it, and thank you for sending that on, and they're appreciative of that. Went through normal financial status updates of our October, November reports. We did share with the board on our targeted airshed grant in Oak Ridge, which is our wood stove changeout grant. There's two separate grants that we have, one that was awarded in 2019, another one that was awarded in 2022. The 2019 one that closed in November, the grant ended. We were successful in spending all $4.9 million of that grant. We are in kind of final reporting mode. That second targeted airshed grant is still underway, and that grant expires not the end of this summer, but the summer, June 30th, 2027. And there's about 2.7 million in that funding of wood stove changeouts and program management and all of those items. We shared with the board that the audit is complete. We're waiting for our audit report from our auditors, which is Eisler CPA. And the plan is for an audit presentation to be given to the board at the February board meeting. And that still is the timeline that we're following. A larger component with the board was the approval of my contract. The board extended my employment contract with LRAPA by 2 years. Also adjusted pay in the sense of the board established a pay scale for me to follow. And every change on the pay scale is a 2.5% increase, which is the same structure and pay scale that we follow for all staff at the organization. So I appreciated that alignment there, as well as clarified in the contract that if there is a cost of living increase for the organization, I too will benefit from that cost of living increase as well. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to stay in this role. There's lots of growth that we have had, and there's still lots of growth still ahead for us to do our role and meet our mission. And so I'm grateful for the support from the board. Following that, we had a review of our board committee appointments. So we reviewed the Citizen Advisory Committee current roster, looked at the upcoming budgets advisory committee, to which Paul is actually on our budget committee. So thank you, Paul, for that service. There is nothing saying a citizen advisory committee member can't join the budget committee, and we do have a couple seats open on the budget committee. So if you would like to toss your hat in the ring, there still is time to do that. Also reviewed the board commitments. So Howard Saxon is currently the board chair, Director Saxon. His term expires at the end of June. And I don't know that he's planning on reapplying for that. So the city of Eugene will be going through the process. Also, board commitments that are expiring this year are at-large seats, Director Johnston, Director Plummer. I believe they plan to reapply. And then Springfield has their own process that's different from the city for those at-large seats. And in February, we'll be going over election of chair and vice chair for that role. So I've been talking with the board between then and our February meeting on what those chair elections may look like. Then following that, we had a conversation. I gave an update, not a presentation, but shared some information about coordination that's taking place between LRAPA as a regulator, but I would say more broadly, our code amendment changes that the city of Eugene is looking to adopt that involves regulators, it involves LRAPA, but also connects to the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, as well as even the Environmental Protection Agency. The coordination from the city of Eugene and their code amendment changes, what they're trying to implement, or the intent of it, is anytime there's a building permit that they're issuing in certain regions that are zoned industry and a couple commercial in parts of downtown Eugene, the city will send a notification to LRAPA, DEQ, and the EPA that says this applicant has been approved to build this thing. And that communication to us is LRAPA's opportunity to see that and see what that is and have a reflection on whether or not any of those potential things being built may be subject to our rules and regulations. And if so, that's our opportunity to initiate a conversation and potentially collect application if needed or necessary. What it will help to fill, and there has not been an extensive number of these instances, but there's been a couple where we go to a location and because of a complaint, because we drove by and we said, that's interesting, we should go take a look. And we discover that there's processes or things happening that are subject to our rules and regulations, and then we have to get them on board with that. So this coordination should help to minimize in the city of Eugene those opportunities from occurring. So I shared what that coordination looks like for the board. The city of Eugene had a few changes throughout as they settled on what that language looks like that is agreeable and not creating heartburn for those subject to the code change, as well as not increasing too much of a burden on LRAPA and how are we coordinating on this. And the level of workflow increase that would come through is a manageable amount for us. So I shared with the board and asked some of their questions related to that coordination that's taking place. And then went through and reviewed the director's report, which is in the packets provided to the CAC today. And that was the January agenda.
Great.
I have a couple of questions. And when you spoke about COLAs, for wages, are El Rapa staff represented or not?
No, we do not have
Not
any
represented, okay.
unionization here.
And then the other thing that I thought about was we're starting the legislative short session real soon. Are there any concerns about bills, or is El Rapa touting any legislation?
We're not touting any legislation at the moment, and a big part of that is because the long session seems to be where a lot more of those environmental rulemakings get underway. A woman at the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Erin Teverbaugh is her name. She's the liaison with legislatures, and she's so helpful and so on top of what those potentialities are. And she sends out to DEQ, to which El Rapa is a part of, what they're watching in terms of what tracking goes for legislation. We don't have a lot of resources that we can devote to engaging with legislatures on particular topics. So usually the approach is, going into a long session, we like to meet with our representatives for Lane County in just a couple minutes. Hello, who we are, what we work on, and what some of our reflections and needs could be from the legislature, and maintain positive relationships in that approach. And that's really the extent of our legislative involvement.
Thank you.
I will comment that I have heard that there is, DEQ is proposing some pretty significant fee increases. I know El Rapa is separate, but just to let you guys know, statewide, it's raised some concerns, because it's a substantial increase.
Yes, DEQ,
So-
the Oregon legislature has approved a 20% increase to state ACDPs. And so it's a 20% increase to revenue. So I don't think DEQ knows how they're going to adjust the fee table. I think that's part of what they're working on. There is a rules advisory committee on that change coming up in early February. I think it's the 6th. I plan to plug into that to see what some of the conversation in the room is. But I understand DEQ's need to have those fees be increased to support the work that's being done. And in a similar fashion, El Rapa is looking at that to see in what way our own fee structure needs to be adjusted to stay close in line with DEQ, as well as because we share the same needs that DEQ does.
Well, and one of the things that DEQ hasn't done that El Rapa does is that staged, like year by year, so that you don't have to do such a
Big jumps.
big jumps.
Yes, we are following, we're currently behind, or our fees are not behind, that's the wrong way to say it, but are less than DEQ's fees are. We have more, our fees are currently higher on applications that we receive, and then annual fees are a little bit lower. So as DEQ starts to adjust their fee table, Max and I are watching closely on what that looks like to see what that may translate for Lane County.
Great, thank you. That's the only one that I'm aware of. That
Yeah, I appreciate
slightly
that. No,
related.
that is an important one.
On the permit coordination with the city of Eugene, the way maybe you said this and I just didn't hear it. When there's a new project, I think there's a responsibility on the applicant to determine if they have permit responsibilities with
Self-attest.
state and local agencies. The way I heard it was that the city would notify state agencies in El Rapa and say, is a permit required? But I think there's also a proactive responsibility on the permit applicant too. Is that right?
So the city has worked through a couple versions of those codes. El Rapa commented on version 3, which we were in support of that version. And that version included that self-attestment from the source that says, here's all of my environmental needs that I would need to have. I can't speak to what the city's reflections were on going from version 3 to version 4, but version 4, which is what the Planning Commission has sent to council for council review, does not contain that self-attestment. It is just applying for a permit, building permit. And if it's within these categorical description of industry, commercial throughout the city that's identified in that code, then we as El Rapa will benefit from the FYI, we have approved this building permit, and it will not include the self-attestment that would have been included under version 3, but there's a new version that the Planning Commission considered and then is planning to send to City Council.
On that topic, do you also have in that permitting with the city of Eugene, are you looking at operations of the entity that we building? I'm thinking of Amazon warehouse, of course, in West Eugene is a very hot topic right now. I don't know if LRAPA is weighted
It's-
on that or, I mean,
well,
the big impact for that, of course, is all the traffic of trucks going
Right.
all over the place.
And so part of, at least on Amazon, one of our approaches to that is, where in our rules and regulations does those activities, those changes take place? And so one of our reflections, at least for the Amazon facility, is of the parking lot size that exists, is there enough pollution that's being created from the combustion vehicles that could create a short-term air quality issue? We don't have the ability to reflect on what's that impact on the road. Part of our process in our Title 20, as we were working through that permit, is potentially requiring some modeling to say, well, what is that pollution collection going to be? And is it going to exceed any standards? But that only exists if there's so many vehicles over a line, it's about 1,000. And so the Commerce site was able to agree through permit conditions that they will have electric vehicles in their fleet. And what we have in that permit specifically is it's an increasing amount over 10 years, and keeps that under that 1,000 threshold, which in our rules and regulations, if it was above that 1,000 threshold, then we would have the legal authority to require some of the monitoring that could be done to get at that air quality issue. But with the commitments to having EVs, which are not combustion vehicles, will not create that air quality concern. They're not going to be over that 1,000 threshold. And then we lose the authority essentially to say, do this because we have the authority to tell, they're able to demonstrate compliance under that 1,000 without it. So that's where some of our rules and regulations and how we walk through what we have the authority to require and what we don't have the authority, where it applies to the code changes with the city of Eugene. It doesn't quite get to that level. It'd just be more of we see that this building is going in and it's our opportunity to investigate further or to reflect upon, do they already have a permit with us? And if so, do we know about this building and this change that's happening? And if so, awesome, because they're, but if we don't, that it prompts a conversation that could lead to what could be more regulatory oversight.
Paul here. Paul, you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I thought LRAPA didn't have any jurisdiction over motor vehicles, period.
We don't. So what that is, but it is, at least on the Title 20, we have authority for local air quality impacts from those motor vehicles. So what we can't do, we can't say, LRAPA, that vehicles in Lane County, whether they're manufactured or bought or sold, have to meet a certain efficiency standard. In the United States, that level of mobile emission regulation happens on the federal level, and the federal government says to car manufacturers, either importing or creating new, here's the standard that cars rolling off the fleet have to meet. We are all about stationary source regulation, and so it's not so much that we're regulating the vehicles per se, we're regulating the aggregate air emissions from the parking lot of those vehicles in. And so the parking lot is the stationary thing, and there's emissions associated with the stationary thing, which is vehicles going in and out and driving. And that is where we, under Title 20, have the regulatory authority to say, let's talk about this.
Now, LRAPA's number, though, for the parking lot was reduced compared to DEQ's, right?
Yes.
That was one difference, is that LRAPA lowered that number of vehicles for the parking lot to trigger the evaluation.
And I would say that we didn't lower it. It was more that it's an old title that was passed in the late 1970s when lead was in gasoline, and a whole, Title 20 has a lot of reflection on lead, which is not quite as applicable anymore. And it's more that LRAPA has not updated that title and raised that threshold in the way that the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality has. So the e-commerce site in West Eugene, that same project outside of Lane County routed through DEQ would not have had any regulatory involvement in that project. Yeah.
So the electrification goals going forward, different steps over the 10 years, do those apply to subcontractors, delivery subcontractors of the e-commerce facility, or just directly to e-commerce facility vehicles?
It's just the fleets that basically are like on site, that live on site. So if it was a contractor, that is a vehicle, that's a fleet that doesn't live there at the end of the day, it doesn't park, stay, leave. It's an item that is, that doesn't count, or we were not reflecting on those emissions from those vehicles.
Wouldn't the majority of the activity be subcontractors?
I can't speak to if that would or would not be.
You were speaking about the authority of LRAPA and the authority of the federal government. Aren't there also certain states, like I believe Washington State has tailpipe emission standards that you have to go in, be tested every couple of years. If you fail, you have to go to a shop and get it repaired.
And we have those in Oregon too. Portland and Medford have both
Okay.
of those. And so the nuance there, that's a common question. And that's one question when I started LRAPA, I asked too. I was like, well, why do we do this program in Portland and Medford, but not Lane County? And so that's because Portland and Medford have, through their monitoring, demonstrated that ozone's a little bit more elevated. And the federal government has standards on ozone. They said everybody has to be below these standards. And historically, Medford and Portland have been above those standards. And so whenever there's violating federal standards, the EPA says to the applicable state, what's your plan to address this issue? And that's called a state implementation plan. And so back in the day, DEQ, part of their plan was that VIP vehicle inspection program that says, well, we need to make sure that our vehicle emissions the engines are running well. And so we're going to have people be inspected to make sure they're meeting these standards. And that has been successful, and they have seen their ozone decrease. Lane County and our monitoring, our ozone level never got to the point where we were passing federal standards. So Oregon never had to tell the EPA, there's a problem in Lane County, so to speak, related to ozone, and here's our plan to do it. So we never had that need in Lane County, and thus a VIP program was never established.
Aren't the Washington State standards statewide? So they're for every county, every municipality?
I believe Washington has their own level of state kind of like thresholds that's different from the Clean Air Act, but I'm less informed on
Okay.
that nuance.
I used to live there, so.
California as well.
Yeah.
I will say one thing, so this is on the federal level, this has been in the news, is a consideration from the EPA to void the waivers. The California waivers is kind of the plain language way that people speak about it. So under the Clean Air Act, there is a description of here's how car manufacturers are going to improve their emissions over time. California said, we want to do it a little bit differently, and our way of doing it is going to be more stringent. And so they said, let's do it this way. Other states, Oregon included, Washington, Nevada, there's like 11 of them, said, we want to do the same thing. And the EPA said, fine, but only if you kind of copy paste. If you're like ditto, the states can do this as well. The EPA is considering, and I think it will require Congress action to void those waivers, which means all of the authority backed up by federal authority for California and other states to say to car manufacturers, new vehicles off the fleet have to be so clean, will go to an older way of reflecting on it in a less standard approach. So that's a change on the federal level that is happening currently underway right now. Yeah.
All right, we should probably move on. Thank you very much. That was very
Yeah,
helpful.
of course. I like the questions, and it's good to engage with insightful questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So next on the agenda is the CAC membership expansion. So as you guys might recall, we've had a few conversations about just opening it up, right? We have potentially 15 slots for our advisory committee and, doing outreach. And so there were definitely a few people that had not only like roles, but maybe even specific people in mind, or maybe a specific agency or organization. And so we came up with a bit of a kind of generic email/letter, depending on how formal, and it's on the last page of the packet. Can we maybe bring that up online so they can see it? And we don't necessarily have to like approve this today, but we're trying to keep it simple and just a little bit of an outreach. So we would appreciate your guys' input on this. But also, so give it a read, but then also if you have people or organizations in mind, we'd love to do a little bit of outreach on this. And I think depending on response, we'll decide if we think as a group, we need to actually change the bylaw, like to actually go through and formally add positions, or if we have enough flexibility to just add
Put them
people,
in.
put them in. But basically, you know, just trying to keep it real simple is we're just doing some outreach, saying that we think that they might be a good fit and inviting them to come to a meeting and see if that's something that they or somebody from their group would like to, you know, to consider joining. So if you guys can look this over, right now we have it coming from me as the chair. That seems, but you know, depending on if you know the person individually, or like we said, this can be presented more individually, more personally, if it's actually going to a specific person versus a group.
And I will just say that while what you're seeing there is just the draft of the language, like these letters, which could be delivered, you know, as like a PDF, but also in the mail, would be on a wrap a letterhead and have kind of, you know, our formality to it and official components on it.
Yeah. So did everybody have a chance to look at that? Yeah, did you guys online have a chance to read that? Yes, from Chris. Evelina? No, you didn't. Ben?
Yes, I have.
All right. Well, I guess then if, you know, people support it, I guess the next step would be if you guys have people, right? To please bring it to the group and,
Yeah, Kelly, just one thing I noticed, it says in the first paragraph, it refers to the Community Advisory Committee, CAC. I think it's supposed to be citizens.
Oh, yeah.
Just something. And is it good catch?
good catch.
This looks good to me.
All right. But yeah, I'll be honest, I can't remember exactly who had somebody in mind, so,
I think I brought up the idea of having a medical
yeah.
trained person, whether that's a doctor or a nurse, or even, you know, thinking about like the allergy and asthma center, the folks that specialize in breathing.
I think, yeah, if there's we should do a little outreach if you have some
Well, I think
specifics.
what could be help is we compile just like a list, and even if they're just like brainstorming ideas of like who this is, I think that it could be worthwhile. Like, here's the people we want to outreach from the group, and then I think we put a little bit of effort into like, what does that translate into, like email addresses, names that we could potentially send out to.
Yeah, because the board, when we let them know that we were working on a draft letter, there was a lot of interest and a lot of ideas thrown out there as far as like, you know, asbestos contractors and, you know, electricians and people working on stuff. And so, yeah, maybe we, you know, if you guys have ideas that you could see beneficial, we can start compiling that list and then get a little bit more specific. So, but.
Used to have on the CAC, MD, a medical doctor. His name is Larry Dunlap, Dr. Larry Dunlap. He was a longtime CAC member. So has been on the representation, has been on the CAC before. Another person was John Tamilonis with Springfield Planner. He was really good, and I think the bylaws call out metropolitan planning or city planning, and that one's been a hard one to refill. If I had my magic wand, I'd wish for a city planner to join us.
Well, I mean, even that, like, send some letters to the city planning department.
Yeah.
County,
Sandy Bilson is in charge of that.
Yeah, so if you guys have ideas, proposals, email them to me and
Yeah.
Travis and Matt, and we'll start compiling it. And then when we have a good little list going, we'll get together and.
Yeah, I would say the email should keep kind of like Heather and Matt included. I'm keeping up with my email box, but I'm slower on getting to that. And so the faster coordination is going to be not me being that coordinator. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I'm wondering after the YU statement where it says El Rapids Board of Directors, I'm wondering if, or above that actually, where El Rapids is Lane County Air Quality Agency, I wonder if that could be expanded to say, you know, you guys actually monitor air quality, right? And you also deal with asbestos abatement. So see, if you broaden your list of what actually is done, you
Yeah.
might engender more.
Well, we had it longer,
You
we
might
had it more
engender more.
inclusive and it got cut back a little bit to try to keep it simple, because originally we had everything listed out and it felt a little long, but I think we can bring some back,
The
yeah.
feedback being like, if we're like, hey, we want your asbestos perspective, it'd be helpful to say, because we talk about asbestos, kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
That was my thought.
yeah,
And
certainly doesn't hurt.
Does the link towards the end of the letter go to the LRAPA website, or is that a YouTube channel? Or I think it would be good to direct to the LRAPA website if that doesn't do that.
We had the website listed, but I think.
Yeah,
it's the website.
It goes to the CAC's section
Yeah,
of
yeah, I
our
think it linked.
website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, any other thoughts on that and changes? And you don't have to, they can keep coming in. This is going to be a living document as we implement it and send it out, so.
I do think that the next meeting might be a good place to have some thoughts of what this outreach could be, because which we'll get into the next agenda item, but with some of the rulemaking coming up with the CAC functioning as a rules advisory committee, some of that, like, who's all the perspective that's missing from this conversation as part of that review. And so this timing is kind of apt a little bit, at least in getting some other perspectives.
I agree. Okay. Yeah, with that coming up, it would be nice to get some other opinion perspective. So I guess we can move on to the rulemaking advisory participants.
Yeah, I can engage on that.
Okay.
Okay, so this is me doing a little bit of a monologue, but to give some understanding of what rulemaking will look like with the Citizen Advisory Committee. So I should start with a little bit of a higher level, but under Oregon law, whenever there's a rulemaking that an agency goes through, they're required to put together what's called a RAC, or Rules Advisory Committee. And the goal of these committees, essentially what is kind of like to stress test the rules, to go through and explore, like, what are all the potential fiscal impacts and technical feasibility to these rules before they actually are proposed and go on in. LRAPA, as a local governing body under our ORS, we're required to have a citizen advisory committee just because. And so for this, our organization, we don't form ad hoc RACs that exist for a couple months and then they disband. We use our CAC as our RAC opportunity. And so what does that mean for the CAC is we're going through some rulemakings. It's that stress test kind of question is a fast way to say it. But so it's a fiscal question, like for Title 43, which is asbestos, which I think will be the first rulemaking that we engage on, is what is the impact to businesses in the community, small businesses, in terms of if abatement contractors under this rules are supposed to do A, B, and C, and under these rules, they have to do A, B, C, and D. What's the cost on them to now do D, or what are these changes? So it's reflections on that. Some technical questions. Does this seem like something that can be feasible? An equity reflection, like I said, of like, who are we missing in the conversation that we need to make sure that they understand that these conversations are taking place. And like the whole sum of it is like, does these changes make sense to a lay person without that technical subject matter expertise reading through these? Is what your read coming out of it align well enough with like that more technical read? And if so, that's a great sign that we're kind of like have the language where we need to be. And then the following that, at the end of that, is the CAC has to kind of come to a consensus or a recommendation to the group or to the board, which is to adopt as written or to adopt with the changes that is suggested from the CAC. This is all work that happens before we go to public notice. So on the timeline of Title 43, which is our asbestos rulemaking, it still is currently under legal review. My hope and my belief is that next week we'll have that legal review feedback provided to us. If there's any tangible feedback from that legal review, we'll want to digest it and implement that feedback that we think is necessary. And then at the end of February, because it's January, the February CAC I believe that we will be ready to bring those rules to the CAC. And that will include like a staff report of some of the, what's that fiscal component? What is the technical changes? What actually is the difference between these two items? And that first meeting with the Citizen Advisory Committee is to understand, unpack, and then it becomes the next CAC meeting. Following that is the like, what is that feedback from the group? If there's a reflection that, hey, we want a subcommittee to meet and answer this particular question or follow this particular task, next meeting's the meeting to try to like figure that out, decide what that are, and then set that into motion. But there will be a CAC meeting where we have that consensus statement that goes to the board. Once we have that consensus statement, then we ask the board agreement to hold a hearing for our rulemaking for the changes. We will go to public comments. There'll be a period of time, 30 days, I think is the minimum, but whatever the board wants that comment to be at minimum or longer. We formally collect that content. That's where, especially on the Title 43, that's where, in my mind, it's important for us as the organization to say, hey, abatement contractors in Lane County, like direct outreach and communication of saying this is something that could impact you. Here's the opportunity for those comments to be provided back to us and making sure that they're looped in. Following that public comment period, the board holds a hearing and then the board can choose to adopt. And if they choose to adopt, then the rules go into effect there. The board also has the opportunity to say, we adopt these rules, but they don't take effect until a certain time. And those are all things that can come out too, you know, from like feedback from the advisory committee could say, we think these are great, but we think that jumping into these new rules overnight could be really difficult. So we think that maybe a one-step, two-step approach could be healthy. And understanding how we want to go about the rulemaking, that's figuring those things out is what the Rules Advisory Committee helps us do.
Can the board also modify the rules in their adoption?
Could. I think that they would probably have recommendations, and then from a technical perspective, we would take those recommendations and then come back to them with what we think would be the case. But it is their authority to which we are operating under. So if they want something to be worded a specific way, they could have the authority to do that.
And as a reminder, these are, you know, our meetings are public. So
Yeah.
if there's somebody who we reach out to who maybe doesn't want to join the CAC, but we can invite them to come to the meetings for input, that's something to keep in mind too, because this is one that would be really beneficial to have the perspective of the people who have to.
I think that next, the February CAC meeting, presuming that we are ready to go to kick this ball down the hill, which I think we will be from the timeline perspective. I think in that meeting, that's a good opportunity for us to really figure out who we should be directly connecting with. Asbestos abatement contractors, I think, meet that list. And then the next CAC meeting that happens, if you're on the CAC, you can participate in that dialogue and that discussion. If you are not on the CAC, we have a public participation component where they can participate, voice their concern or their support, whatever that may look like. But then as far as like dialogue during the meeting, it still is, you have to be on the CAC to participate in that way. So,
Makes sense.
yeah.
So we should plan on right now tentatively February and March being dedicated.
Yes. Okay. And that's Title 43. We will have Title 15, which is our enforcement title that is also under legal review right now. And then following that up, Max is working on some stationary source rulemaking that we'll be going through as well. And we'll be, I think in that sense, still using the CAC. That's harder in the way that it does get into more technical weeds, but we do have industry perspective on the CAC.
So I will say in the past, when we've been tasked with this, sometimes because we're only meeting once a month, you know, there may be need on this to go a little longer or something on some of these because this is more technical and a subcommittee or something might, we'll see how it goes, but
Yeah,
I do know that sometimes these things only meeting once or twice isn't quite enough time
yeah.
to be able to get through all of it. So we will cross that bridge when we get to it, but.
And we do have, we have flexibility to take a pace that we want to take. I will say that some of like on Title 43 for asbestos is, these are rule changes that we recognize would be good to have to help to make things easier for those trying to follow the rules, but then for us trying to implement the rules. So we are looking forward to having these rules be adopted. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to hear all perspectives and have that feedback to be collected. But getting into the new rule regulatory framework will be good for Lane County. So making sure we're not taking too slow of a process is important.
Any thoughts or comments on that? All right, we are getting slim for time. So upcoming topics, I think we got pretty much just covered that because our next couple of meetings are already. But again, as always, if you guys have other ideas for future stuff, please don't hesitate to bring that forward. We'll do a quick roundtable. We'll start with the folks online. Chris, do you want to start? Roundtable?
I don't usually have something. I don't feel like I do. Dead of winter. That's good. As an agency, we're entering our budget season, and so a lot to do locally. But yeah, nothing. I don't think anything really as it relates to this group. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Paul?
I really don't have anything today.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Ben?
Same as Paul.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Evelina?
Hi, I don't have anything today.
All right. Thanks, Evelina.
Had a question regarding one of the emails that came from the agency about Bakelite Chemical. It was an interesting email because it said they're petitioning to have their amounts decreased, and that seemed like an unusual situation.
Yeah.
Can you explain why they would do that?
I will
Decrease their fees?
Yeah, asking Matt to help or Max to help me out on this, but my recognition is it's an approach from Bakelite to change the type of permit of which they're holding. And so adjusting how much they're telling us as the regulator of here's how much we could or plan or will limit ourselves to has an impact on what size of a permit that they get. And a bit of that is in the Title V federal permit land versus just the state level permit. And so I think some of those adjustments are for Bakelite to get to that. But Max, is there more that I'm leaving out that you think would be good to fill in?
Yeah, I mean, I could, talk about this for minutes and hours, I guess, but yeah, Bakelite is trying to get out of Title V, so they're reclassifying, re-permitting. They want to get out of some major source federal regulations that are kind of onerous and difficult to comply with. Part of it is they have a really oversized boiler for their needs now. It was installed, 40 years ago, and they made a lot more different resins and they needed more steam. That boiler's difficult to keep up, and so now they're getting more efficient boilers too, smaller boilers that'll be more efficient, and that allows them to get out of the boiler MACT or maximum achievable control technology, the federal standard. So kind of a long project to get into a more appropriate size permit and equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Peter?
Oh, just in the director's report, the amount of public outreach continues to be robust, and I appreciate that. Good work.
Yeah, Matt's a key component to that. The board also reflected the most recent meeting on the timing of the board meetings. So we are polling the board to figure out if the second Thursday at 12:15 is still the most appropriate place for the board to meet, or if we want to adjust that. The general sense I get is the current approach is what seems to be agreeable to most, but we are entertaining the opportunity for that to be reflected differently.
I will just put it out there that if anyone here is interested in learning from the community health assessment that wrapped up, that was conducted across the county with public health and partners, including folks like Jesse, and they have now put it into a final community health improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan that has priorities, and now they're developing the strategies. They're even looking for people to join the committee to help develop those strategies. But everything from like the built environment, transportation and stuff, to access to basic needs and mental health and some other
And it
components.
takes a while to put those guys together, doesn't it? Like,
To,
assemble the plan, like.
yeah, oh yeah, it was a year-plus long process, for sure, yeah. So there's.
Is that
links.
available?
Yeah, if you were to look at Live Healthy Lane, that's the kind of the host organization that's overseeing the whole process. They'll have a link to the CHP, it's the acronym. They don't have the I in it because CHIP is an acronym that's claimed already by another group. So Community Health Improvement Plan.
Great. All right.
I appreciate that we have Lane County Public Health here to have those questions and to reflect on how we can make progress and improve. And here's a plan to help us get there. So, yeah.
It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, with that, I guess we can adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all the.
Thanks all.
Close, a little over.
I mean, it's not too bad. All right, all right.